hearings. He is an architect and a professor at the University of Michigan, Catie, Alfred Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. She is also part of a partnership with Taubman. They have an arts initiative through its faculty ambassador program, which I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about. So we're really excited to have someone from downstate from Newell here. We always record this, so it's on Zoom, but we have some extra people here recording because this is the first event like this. So you all get to be the first people to see this. So congrats. And also Catie will be having a workshop after this at noon down in the lower Carnegie classroom. If you don't know where that is, we can show you. It is a free event. So if you're interested, you can sign up online or at the front desk. There are a few spots left, so we encourage you to sign up and participate. It's going to be a really great experience. And then I also want to thank our sponsors today. So our sponsors for this whole program, these exhibitions, and all the programs that many of you have been participating in are Women Moving Millions, Charlevoix County Community Foundation, Taubman Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation, Comfort Keepers, Michigan Arts and Culture Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. So thank you again for being here. We appreciate you supporting the arts and being a part of this community. And I'm going to introduce Catie.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for Catie for having us, and so grateful that you all also to join me this morning. I'm going to present some of the work that I do. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm an architect and a designer at the University of Michigan as a professor of architecture. There's some Michigan alum supporters here. I do a lot of work that I would say ranges everywhere from installation, architecture, objects. I'm going to talk through some of those and then also talk through some of the things that will be central to the way that I'm going to run the workshop later today too. So just to give you a little bit of sense, titled the lecture Night and Light. I would say that a lot of the work that I do is actually very interested in having darkness and light be part of our spaces, part of our objects. It might even be fair to say in some of my work that those are in fact the main occupants of the work. I do a lot of things through material-based research, really fine, sort of delicate things that are really having an effort in trying to tell different stories, different textures, bring out different effects, some of which are often trying to either be very ephemeral or work through spaces that are themselves in a sort of transition or alteration. And so these things come through in terms of just careful study and observation. I would say that my practice is very much so experimentation and observing what might happen and working from there to all the spaces. And I also do a lot of work in existing spaces. So existing spaces for me offer a really great opportunity to just think through something that's already there and remake it for something that is somehow familiar and unfamiliar all at the same time. So I'm going to start actually just by talking through some of my work. A little bit, I would say, of a theme, both in the workshop and the work that I'm presenting, that has a lot to do with marking a kind of moment in time, making things precious, and allowing things to even, I'd say, transfer or get retranslated a bit. So I'll just go through some of my work, so maybe that makes a little bit more sense to see actual examples. So this is a piece that I did that's called Second Story. And in its sort of easiest way to mention how to describe it, I would say it's the recasting of a space that was going to be under demolition. Basically the recasting and moving of a space. It was working with this building in Flint, Michigan. It was the old part of the Carriage Town neighborhood. It was an old duplex funeral home. And I was brought in initially actually to first just help with assessing the roof, water damage, with a group that was trying to save the building. It was under threat of demolition. And I recognized at that time I had also been asked to be doing a show in Chicago. So I took the chance to think about if there was a way to sort of mark the potential loss of this building. If it was going to be demolished, it would greatly change the massing of the neighborhood and sort of the loss of part of that historic district. So the work that ended up evolving out of that was in essence to, let's say, put or cast part of the interior and exterior of that space. I was trying to trace the form before it was gone. And so this is done, these are actually acrylic rods, transparent, they've been pulled and pulled to a thin attenuation with the interest of casting part of the exterior and part of the interior. And so I was basically working with it on site and then had the opportunity with that other gallery exhibition to, in essence, relocate that. So it's fair to say that I made a cast of that part of the building. The work's called Second Story because it was part of the second story and now I'm trying to give it a new life and it's sort of cast and relocation. So you can see, sorry if the pointer's not big, you can see that there was the cast of the interior and the exterior, which gives us this void in the middle. That's basically the mass of the wall that's no longer there. And I worked a little bit to make sure that the cast was not perfect. We translated it in a way to see if there was a possibility to make new spaces that were different from the original one. And that happened because if you can imagine that I have the cast of the exterior, the interior, and I rotate it just a little bit, we end up getting spaces that don't exist over here. So you have this space, this would be the opening of that wall. So now within the gallery setting, you can actually enter that wall space that previously wasn't existent. I also, as I mentioned, cast part of the second story. This has been brought down to a first story state, and you're able to move around it. So there's different and new ways to occupy it. And then the other one that I'll mention is basically the cast around the windows. In the relocation, we added more material there to basically extend it so it becomes somewhat of a hallway. So we tried to design a new space. We were calling it the sillway. But that space that anyone in the gallery could walk through is in essence a new space, was of course not part of that original building. And the work I'd say was also just really important in some of the other projects that I've gone on to do, where there's a little bit of, when you move around it, there's kind of recognition, you see that original form of the house. And then if you move to other angles like this one, it starts to actually just look more conflict, more ephemeral, and the ability for it to be as well kind of whisked away in its existence. And then the other thing I will mention is it's suspended from the ceiling. So none of it touches the ground, only the shadows and anyone who's experiencing it, or it's actually on the ground for this project. This maybe gives a better sense of some of the shadows. Yeah, it worked out well. Wait, the lights? Are the lights able to be dimmed just a little bit? I have a lot of dark images, you can tell. So hopefully I'll try to describe that too. A little bit of the detail, the angle, the way it was made was based on the angle of the roof, and just really kind of presenting that original house. This is just some process photos. Oh, I will mention there's one more part of this story. So, in a strange turn of events, through the possible demolition of this historic house, the gallery that we had it in, there was a problem. A longer story, not to belabor, but the gallery actually got evicted during the time. So we had to very quickly remove the project, which meant that we were then intense kind of, well, if we can demo this and not demo the house, we've had a success with that project. And I will say the original house is not. Yeah, that was it. And this just shows actually when we moved it very quickly, we had to move it very quickly because we were also on the way to another show. We put it in a nearby storage unit and again went through that process of thinking about you can't actually, if we demo our buildings, then put it in storage or do that. So again, we let this piece sort of allow us to go through the kind of act of the loss of the warning what might happen if that duplex in Flint was to be demolished. So another project that I did, this was here in Detroit, Savage Landscape. It's sort of simple way of discussing it would be that it was the curation of the demolition of an arson house. This was done, what kind of house? It was arson. Okay, yeah. This is right across the street actually from our train station, which was recently reopened. This was one of the two houses, the two historic houses that were still left facing Roosevelt Park. I was brought in on this one because the owners were trying to figure out how to take this house completely demolish it and make a rotating art gallery in its existing foundation. So it kind of was brought on board. They had asked a muralist to do some work on it before it was torn down, and then they asked me to figure out a project. What I would do as soon as it became the foundation gallery, basically to be their first artist. And I realized in some kind of process that the process of demolition was maybe the moment to be interacting with space. And so this became my studio for a couple of months. I started to work, you can see a little bit of some of the efforts of the muralist paintings, but we started to actually work and be part of the assistance of taking down the house and trying to slowly figure out what can be made of this moment of the house that has all this beautiful material that unfortunately is from the act of arson, but it's very bulbous, shiny, dark, has a kind of texture that you wouldn't get had there not been a fire. And so we started to curate and carefully sort the wood. This is us moving through the demolition. There was a lot of people sorting the ceramics that were still in the house or the bricks. We started to very carefully take the wood and sort it on the site. And then we got to this moment, you can start to see the piece just beginning right here, but we got to the moment where the front half of the house was stabilized. And we used that to sort of make this perfect section cut and then figure out how to use the house as both the palette and the formwork to make a sculpture out of what was originally the house. And so this is the moment you can see there's a little bit of beginning to make a frame, and then we're taking the wood and putting it back into the house. This maybe helps a little bit with that. The wood was sliced, and because the fire was put out, it wasn't burnt all the way through, so you'd see this more bare moment of wood and how it was sliced. So these are the wooden pieces placed, and they're actually been able to, because they were burnt, they're lighter. So they can cantilever deeper into the space in a way that a green wood or wood that's not been burnt cannot do, just the weight of it pulling it down. And so again, this is not jumping ahead. I wanted to work carefully, similar to what I did with second story, to have something that really allowed for somebody to walk through. But it still was very spatial and there was an occupation to it that made it, continued to make it architectural even though it was becoming something else. So this is basically, you all are sitting kind of in the backyard looking towards the house again with all these pieces that are cut. And now we're going to walk through what is that, in essence, that kind of tunneling. So you go in, you get deeper into these chars. This is turning back and looking back. You all are familiar with the winter weather and the backyard there. This is looking back. And then we start to move around. So this is now backing out. It takes a turn. This is right where the epicenter of the fire was. And then you go around to the other side and you see all the cantilevers. So this is all those same pieces of wood that you see the butt ends on the opposite side, and shows that cantilever I was talking about. Because they're lighter, they now can project deeper into the space and have a different sort of feeling. And so this was the kind of remaking of that space. We had no electricity on the site, so all of our tools were battery or gas powered, and we have this careful rhythm that we had to stop at the end of each day, of course, as the sun setting, because it just became too dark to work. This is adding such a kind of darkening of light to the space. And so we did have these wonderful moments right at sunset, though. This is in the month of October, and at that time the sun is setting almost directly opposite the park, opposite the house. And so you see these golden rays, these are coming in through the front door. And this actually gave us a moment where we changed the project a little bit, that kind of listening to the material and the optical effects. And you can see some light. So it's still up here. Yeah. The light poking through right there. It would raise that really dark charred wood, and it would leave this golden edge. And so because we recognized that, we basically opened that up. That crack came later to see that we'd get, maybe just for 5 minutes, you would get this golden raising in that space. And this was the piece we did at the time. This was a moment when there was, unfortunately, a lot of fires still in the city. This actually ended up being concluded on Devil's Night in 2010. So this was one of the last Devil Nights where there was a lot of walking around and switching with the Angels Night. So this sort of marked one of the home bases where people could come and check in and then go and continue to walk and try to assess if there were any other fires that were happening. And so this you can see now, the wood entirely tucked into that space, that section cut. And then what we did, the next step was to demolish the 3 rooms around it that were sort of the formwork of the space. So when that demolished, you've got this really dense core that's made from half the house. And you see these lines came from where the, these would have been parts of the, in the roof. Basically, not everything was burned through, so you're seeing the trace of the other member in the roof. And, you know, we of course couldn't, we knew this was gonna come, we carefully placed those, and we couldn't see this until that moment of continuing the demolition. And so this project then, it also continued to have more of a life of being the dense core of that house. It was transferred over to one of the art pie shows in Grand Rapids. I think in 2010 was set outside the museum there in this sort of strange kind of arrives half of the house and then I think more importantly, it returned to the site across from the train station. It's still on the properties with the same owners. Basically trying to now add back the massing, the same way the sort of second story we talked about the sort of loss of that massing. This was taking a moment as this piece was basically also seeing it sort of end to put some of the massing back on that street. So it was very carefully lined in front of these. Sadly, the house got hit with fire again right after this came back. So the story kind of continued to evolve over time. And then this shows you the place where it was. And then now, if you guys have been there recently, this house has been entirely renovated and it's being used. And so the site has been able to evolve as well too, this marking that moment where it needed to transition over.
Is that still there?
My piece is not still there. Well, somebody took it over, we acquired it and turned it into a fence in the neighborhood. But I can't answer it, sorry, I never asked the question. I can't answer, I can't, I haven't seen yet if it's still there, it was on private property. Did you have something? Yes.
When you say people were able to walk through it, was it open to the public or a select few?
It was just open. Just there.
It's amazing that staff that you were able to open it up, you know,
Yeah.
structure lines.
Yeah, we definitely did at a moment where we were able to get that part of the house fully stabilized. And then it sort of was just, I would say at that time, there wasn't any, other than the group trying to change it into the foundation, it wasn't sort of like there wasn't like an opening party or an event or locked hours or anything. That's kind of existed in its own time there. And anyone who happened upon it or word of mouth was free to walk around it. Yeah.
Who is we? Is
Oh, sorry.
it students plus yourself or?
So I'm from called Alibi Studio. I usually use we because you'll see credits also too in terms of project team members. Alibi Studio ebbs and flows with every project, and I also think the light, the material, all of that adds to the project. So I never think any of it is just me. So we just comes out. I was also Nadir Tarani is my architecture mentor. We talked long ago the importance of just crediting everyone knowing that it's a part of the evolution of the design. So you just it comes out. So you'll see names that go everywhere from my dad, worked with me for a long time, and I'll talk about that later, to students, employees. I have Pearl here today, she's done a lot with the glasswork that we're doing, so she's a we when later in the slides. Yeah. So this project is called Overnight. It is a combination in a way of sort of two studies. Overnight was basically trying to capture a moment in time when we were getting new electrical lighting in the city of Detroit and losing what was the sodium vapor and kind of this warm light in exchange for the bright LED lights that are now kind of everywhere. And so this was in a sort of a way, I did a project that was running ahead of the Public Lighting Authority, replacing all the lights and capturing these sort of beautiful darkened moments that had these beautiful kind of like auras of a little bit of light and then dark. And so this is a project that's a combination of an installation that reflects on those changes and also a series of photographs that archive those. And so the series of photographs, maybe I'll zoom, make it have a little bit. This is there's an archive within the gallery, and I printed them in such a way it's very hard to capture in photograph. They're printed in such a way that they have a little bit of a metallic sheen to them, so they get a little bit of this variation in the angle that you're at, and they appreciate being daylit more than night. And so it queued up this conversation about the difference of what we see by day versus night in the photographs and the installation. And the installation, I would say, is pretty hard to see by day. It's super thin aluminum wire to mark that the LED lights are electrified by the aluminum wire. And hung a little bit by some copper wire, and then there's tiny little LEDs in the wiring, and then basically they have a different name for that. So I'll show more pictures to make that make sense. Here's a zoom up on one of the photos. So this is capturing a corner, and basically at that time, I would say the infrastructure of the streetlights was such that it could be anywhere where it was. So there's a lot of darkened spaces, and then it would illuminate these beautiful, let's just say, fragments of the architectural spaces that were there. And as you can tell with my work, I'm very interested in kind of a little bit of fragmentation of architecture, the implication, how much of a space do we need before it's gone, to have it feel like we're somewhere, or to question its sort of extents. And so these photographs, we're capturing those moments, just getting these areas that now, all of these spaces still exist, but these photographs are impossible to take. The lights are extremely bright around them, and we no longer have this sort of calming moment. And I work with darkness a lot because I think that it actually adds a real interest in just the variation in like deep colors, senses of calm, the ability to switch what's foreground and background, completely change the geometry of what we think we know or see. And so that's why it really pops through my work in a lot of different ways. We should show some of the spaces. This is an intersection right by where I live that I was passing all the time that maybe cued off this, because there's just this beautiful, you can start to see the cadence of where the light is, this kind of trail that you go in the light, out of the light, in the light, out of the light. Just trying to capture that. And so I'd say my photographs for a little bit, just sort of kind of archiving this moment and a little bit of mourning that moment is going to go away. And then the installation, so the aluminum was being used for the LED lights. And it's not as efficient as an energy source, but they wanted to do it where it was no longer overhead copper lines, it was underground aluminum lines. So I made the installation by basically making the aluminum even more inefficient. So coiling it so it became longer and longer and longer and longer. Then you kept long threads to get some of the same, in essence, ghosting that the photographs do. So trying to show just as little hint as possible about the houses or the buildings to be able to say that this is a capture of the house. Maybe more of it's there, maybe it's disappearing, maybe some of it's vanishing, but it's a little bit of what I was seeing spatially in the photographs and trying to hold deeply onto. This is actually one of the key photographs from the installation where you can see the pitch of the roof. And we all can put into that, right? That whole house is there. We can also believe that that house disappeared or is gone. And for me, I love that kind of delicate balance to really celebrate some of the ephemeral work that's happening. This is another one that's really important to the making of the installations, where you can see the lighting of the tree gets that cloud effect that I was saying earlier with second story, and gets that kind of ability to see it from different angles at different times. You can see the LEDs that are in there were so super tiny. But this is by day, it's very hard to see the installation because the space, if we're saying we're in this space, it would be those two walls for floors and then windows, and you would come in, you really couldn't see the installation until you got around to the other side of it, and you had the darkened walls behind it. And so it was a nice play on day and night, and when you can see things and not see things throughout that work. And then the nighttime, you have the high-rise lighting, where it would again start to work like those photographs, that you would see it, and from different angles, you would get that sort of cloud ghosting again. And then there's this work. This is my biggest work so far. Just trying to see my time. This project is called Secret Sky. It's up in Kindy, Michigan, very near to Port Austin. Perhaps some of you have been. There's a group that's up there that is working to try to have an initiative that they've called 10 Barns, 10 Artists, where they've asked artists or designers from Detroit to come and work on different barns, basically barns that are no longer being used and are of course disappearing from the landscape as we replace them with these big aluminum. The machines are getting bigger, the barns are getting bigger, and they're turning into aluminum, and these like very iconic wooden forms are starting to disappear, and yet there's still something quite beautiful about that. So maybe something that's worth mentioning in my practice too, there's kind of a sense constantly of tending and caretaking that always is part of the work. And oftentimes I start at a site, I'm literally just working with that site, taking care of it. I might be sweeping it, I might be fixing part of the structure. Someone was asking earlier about who saw the landscape, the structure. For the barn, there was some beams that needed to be fixed, a column that the ants were eating on the side here, the foundation was a little shifted. And so I started to care for the barn, but really became, this is doing my textbook, is how it did. I really became very interested in how in the big open sky the barn felt very small. And really the only thing that was still inhabiting this barn, because it was no longer being used, was the light. It was the sky. And so that's why it's called Secret Sky. And so I developed a way to, in essence, create a path through that others could go through. You can see this theme of passageways that I've linked. And basically, as you can see, I had to restructure part of the barn. The siding was put cold through, so this is a solid passageway that you can walk through, and then anyone visiting and the light, of course, is constantly going through what we would call the slice. Basically, these two volumes of the single barn was made into. So the barn we use is off of Pinnebog Road. You're seeing this north is up in this direction. So the sun, kind of main active things of the sun is east and west or left and right on this photograph. And it has this huge landscape off of this. So really the sky can kind of take precedence. And when I started working with it, this was the interior. As you all know, the siding is spaced a little bit, so there's airflow. And I was always really in awe of this kind of moment and wondering, and this is what made me think, the light in the sky is really the occupant here. It has the most precious effects. And so this gives you a little peek into we had to be able to do that cut that I'll show you straight on as well too. A beam had to be relocated. We had to reinforce one of the columns, and so a lot of this project took 2 years. So it was a kind of like weekend and open moment of time. 2 years to restructure and then start doing the siding. And this gives you the inside of the slice. We were able to use wood from a barn. So the same initiative. The next barn in line for the fourth barn actually blew over in a windstorm during the use of my barn. So we were able to salvage the wood from that barn to do the interior of our slice. So we like to discuss that this is kind of barn 3 and 4, but it's that next one in line. Got intermingled into here. So there's another barn that basically becomes the inside. And the way the slice works as well is it has to cut through the front facade and through the roof. And that gives you a little into how it does. So this is the barn that fell over. This is now the interior of our slice. And this gives you a sense as you move through from the back, just a little bit of the work that it's not just a cut on either facade, it's actually a change in the massing. And the details, I tried to make those as carefully as possible to look like they've been there all along, that it wasn't something that we added, that instead it sort of very carefully worked its way in. This was before we added the gutter. Everyone who works on buildings, I promise you I added the gutter. But the fine tip points that end up coming from that super sharp cut and looking back, I'm trying to get to the one image that gives you there it is. Oh. This is the like dead on image of being in the slice. And this is what you actually see also as you enter the driveway. So this is your first look. So if you're even driving by, there's a moment of perfect alignment, and then you're entering into the space gives you this sort of picture that a lot of times this is alone, people think that this is fake or it's been photoshopped. But with great obsession, we're able to get everything to line up to be this. And so this is how it's done, what I was mentioning before. It's in a way taking a triangle and physically extruding it all the way through the barn to be able to get that cut and show the sky there. Oh, sunsets are unreal there, I will say. And I've been very happy that Secret Sky has been something that has been able to, in essence, sort of mark the sky and continue to make that bubble feel smaller. This was a very important project for me in just scaling up through the installations to move it to an architectural scale that allowed for something where the building was feeling like a kind of material system or an object, something very capable of us being able to work on and change and transition. The owner was going to let this barn just fall over. So now I'm happy to report that we were able to go from having a 5-year lease to do this project to now having a 100-year lease. Oh, we've added a metal roof, which I'll show in a second, that's going to increase this longevity. I wanted to show also we ended up, so as I mentioned, the projects we go along, just paying attention to the really key optical effects We added solar panels because we noticed when our construction lights were turned on at night, we were able to get the reverse of that effect that you all gasped for, the inside and you see the light. And so for 2 hours every night, about 90 minutes after last light, so once the barn goes into full darkness, these are Paradise Solar on a sensor, they turn on for 2 hours, and it becomes this light again, where I think for me, the most exciting part is these lines go across the landscape and then they go up the trees that are all around. It's a very blurry image, but if you can imagine the barn gets projected in reverse all over the landscape there. And so this is actually a moment of the moon going through, not the sun. It just gives you a sense, and I think this also fits with a lot of the work in terms of thinking that anytime anyone goes to this, their experience is entirely based on what day it is, what the weather is, where the light is, if it's nighttime or not. And so this for us has become a really important piece where the sort of fleeting and ephemeral is left to that kind of preciousness of the exact moment that you're visiting it. And the kind of importance of that and honoring that. And so this is now we were adding the metal roof that I mentioned. We got a grant through the Michigan Economic Corporation to add a metal roof, which of course extends the longevity of this greatly. And so this is the moment of doing February adding a metal roof to a barn. Get the help. And it's beautiful moment too, in essence, kind of doing a landscape drawing with our but the view from above, and all of the fields are still working, are still operating. So it's also a nice cadence with the kind of farming schedules and when we can do big works on it like this. Wow. And I'll mention this is a moment that no longer exists either. This is the moment we ripped the entire roof off and then put the lights on the inside as we get it in all directions. Unfortunately, only 3 people saw this in person, and it's drone, as you can tell from how high up it is. But this is kind of one of those beautiful markers to the ability of just that kind of transformation of the barn, adding something else that wouldn't be possible, and certainly wouldn't be something that would be built from the ground up. This is all in its kind of transition and translation. And I'll shift a little bit to glass quickly as I can go watch it. What time is it?
It's 10:30.
Are people able to go visit that?
Yeah, so the barn is a permanent installation open to the public. It
In
is
what town?
It is in Hume Township. It's at 5213 Penwell Road. I can show you my Gales app. If you look up Secret Sky, it comes up in Google Maps. So it's there, it's open all the time. So it's our first big permanent work.
Okay.
So I'm gonna move a little bit. As you can tell, I haven't forefronted it too much yet, except for in one of the other projects, but glass is, I'd say, maybe my favorite material, like amongst all of these things we're working on when it comes to kind of choice of material, because of what it can do for both light and darkness. I'm often working with glass. And so I'll show a couple of glass pieces and also a little bit of the works that has evolved out of that with some different tones. So this first one is called Eclipse. Eclipse was made out of the spares of a lot of windows for projects at Pilkington Glass to the glass floor, but had of course always a bunch of excess in terms of as it was going through construction. And I was part of an exhibition where Pilkington partnered in Toledo with the Momentum festival that happens to basically match artists with the source of the glass, to in essence experiment with it and do as they want. So I got this huge amount of basically waste architectural surplus and took great interest in seeing what was happening, not as we were looking at the glass through the glass, because often we're looking through glass, but literally looking on the edge of that glass. And their colors, the things I got ranged everywhere from like a little bit of tinted blues to those golds that you maybe see in Southfield if you all have gone to the Southfield towers that are all lots of gold there. There's a little bit of mirror film, to some clears to things that have a little bit of tinted brown. And what I was realizing is when you look at them on an edge, some of them you could continue to see through and see to the other color. Some of the mirror films would start bouncing, and some of them, this is I think the greatest surprise and delight for me, was that, and this is where I learned of a lot of projects and even some of the stuff that we'll have here today, is that when you're looking through the difference from fit to fit, you can get very different colors, very different lights and darks. And so this is a stack. I think there's 4 different glass types in this stack. And again, matching with what I just said about secret sky, it has a lot to do with where you are in the room, what the light is like. But as you move around this, and I think I have a little bit of video of it plays, as you move around this, it actually changes. So what you're seeing right now, if you're seeing the shift from like the gold to green and gold, that's because of the gold films and a little bit of green tint that comes out of glass that already has a little bit of tinting in it. And so based on your height, that's where you would see the range of the green to the golds. And then when you go from right to left, and you see a little bit of blue and brown to lots of blacks, that's because you're seeing through a tiny bit of glass to seeing through a lot of glass. And so this thing just constantly changes as you move around it. It's very sharp on its point, and then as you move through and see the other colors, kind of get the video. Hopefully this will play. Yes. So you start to walk around it. It's very dark at this moment. You're just seeing through the thickness. And then you start to see the color shifts that you get that are based on your height. Well, at this point, based on the height of the camera. You see the blues pop up, you see the yellows. We get on this side again of the piece, and you start to see the full dark. Again, because you're seeing through a thickness that light can't make it all the way through and back to you. And then you get around to the other side, now with the backlit window behind you, you get the yellows that are happening down here, the greens above, and then it takes the point to start to get you the blue as well. And then you start to get all the reflections that come back here too. So it's a pretty wild piece.
Yes.
And it was actually also, I mean, just to add in terms of our efforts to, we used every bit of glass we possibly could. This gives you a little bit more of the color range. So we took rectangles and did 0 waste cuts. We cut them in half and then we cut those into triangles, and that's what the stack is made out of. So besides the ones that we accidentally broke as we were making this, we tried to just do the stack of this access to let every bit of glass survive that making.
What did you make the glass?
So Pilkington is one of the companies in Toledo that it sources a lot of glass for architectural installations, and they donated the glass. You know, you can see around the room other installations by other artists that are all also Pilkington. Basically, they're offcuts from bigger projects. And as far as I know, they do that every year. This joint festival is still going on. Just to show a little bit more of working with glass and trying to work with the shifts of color. I've been doing work for quite a long time. With one of my collaborators, Wes McGee, we were working with trying to figure out at a moment where, so we teach, and Carl's been working with that too, in a program that's focused on digital material technology. So a lot of new fabrication, new material systems, and new ways of making. And so within that setting, we were trying to push along, watching sort of the development with like robotics and CNC machines, that many materials were advancing in their complex geometry, but glass is not getting a lot of attention in that. So we were trying to figure out how we can kind of add to the complexity of forms that glass would give us for both spatial effects and material effects. So that's the kind of underlying trying to figure out how this one ever came to be. This one was sponsored by Guardian Glass. So these are all made from offcuts. This one and another project that I don't think I have an image in. These were all offcuts of leftover automotive glass. So these were made with things that were intended to be windshields, but were gifted to us color-wise. And so we developed a system of figuring out how to slump that glass in a way that give us points that we would know where they were in space, but then these curvatures that would be a little bit more, let's say, buoyant or bulbous in their kind of gestures, which evolved into recognizing that we could use the glass as a way to bounce the very ephemeral light. And so if we have these in darkened enough spaces, what you would end up seeing, you'd see the geometry of the glass, not necessarily, you know, of course it's an object onto its own, but you'd actually see it through reflections as well. And so this became a series of works where, and we discovered this, again, by exploring the material, as we would take these geometries out of our films, we had very boring fluorescent lights at the time above our films. And these stripes were just amazing, and so that really started to drive the kind of curvatures that we could either do in the kiln and assemble together, but also just that kind of line work. And so this is another moment we're trying to allow the kind of existing material to end up hosting that light and show its sort of curvatures and efforts there. And so that we mimic the same fluorescent cadence that we had in this piece. And this was in the Grand Rapids Art Museum as it was transitioning from being the natural history, no, sorry, not the Grand Rapids Art Museum. What used to be the Grand Rapids Natural History Museum, I'm forgetting exactly what it was called, but then got transitioned over to the school that's there now. This was in their, we were in the butterfly day and asked them to do a piece where we learned that we kept reflecting the light. And so you're seeing multiple versions of it because it's also reflecting in the showcase of butterflies. So this sort of just strange project was trying to give that space one more strange occupant before it was left away from being the museum anymore. And it had a few more legs and some these are showing just so I can get to some of the other stuff when we still have time. But this started to work carefully with just the space, and this one was really meant, you're meant to lay underneath it. We were learning a lot about just the kind of feeling, and this one actually launched us into a sound-based project. The acoustics under that curvature was incredible. And then now I'm gonna switch, same thing with some of the, I'm getting ever smaller now. Now we're getting smaller. I wanted to switch to some of the pieces that I started to make that are a little bit more in terms of just allowing the ephemerality of some of the material and still light as well, to very specifically mark transitions of grieving or mourning or transitions from life to death. And so this is a very typical piece of photographs, and they're called mourning, that were meant to be very, very delicate and have launched us into looking at these different, basically candles that can be set for like a ritual, for grief, for an honor for somebody, but they only exist for about 7 minutes. And so it's a real kind of delicate and light it. And in that time you can have an honor and then they go away and they're super delicate. They have some wire built in, so there's parts that are left, but as you can imagine, when these are lit, you're getting something that's really about 3 or 4 or 7 minutes long that can mark this kind of moment, this moment in time. And then comes with that also are if when the light goes out or is extinguished, you get the smoke trails that are lighting it and are reminiscent of just those like very delicate lines in space. And really trying to make things that are very attentive to that moment so we can be sort of super present and just recognize how some of our materials and objects around us can really hold some of this sort of intentionality and emotional weight as we try to deal with grief or mourning or loss or the passage of life. And so this is a very delicate. I don't have any piece because it burned all the way. We don't have any piece with us, but projects that we're still working through. And that has led to what I'd say we do have some that will be part of discussion in the workshop, just the way we're going to launch the workshop. So my father was really key. You asked about some of my we's. My dad was my right-hand man on a lot of the early installations that I've shown, worked very closely as the other member or main member of Alibi Studio for a long time. He passed away in 2020. And he had a lot of wishes for how he wanted to pass and where he wanted to be. And I became his primary caregiver. And in that moment, found ourselves surrounded by some of the works we had done together. Found myself surrounded with wanting to give him everything he wanted, spatially, material, his choices of how he died, where he died, and began to think through literally what is starting to be a series called Objects for Passing. So objects that are amongst us and with us that help either with this moment, help the grieving, make a mark of this moment, honor that moment, and work through those. And so the collapsing of some of the material research has very much so still come with the recognition of the light, the delicacy, the thick and thin flats, things like that. And so this launched into basically some objects that I've made that have their own, let me go to a photograph, it's most helpful to see them. This one, that have their own, so I called to the depth work. So we have some of these, we have more of them down in the workshop space, but I like to speak of them as being somewhere between worry stones and stuffed animals. So they're very heavy glass objects. They work with what I mentioned earlier with eclipse, that they work with the thick and the thin of light and dark. So they have moments that hold the kind of dark and calm and moments where the light in awe pierces through. Pearl, do you want to just hold up some of them in front of the light while we talk about this? And they also have different textures. So glass, you can have it be very textured, or you can have it, maybe just use the projector, yeah, to help with the light. And the shadow behind it too is pretty great. But they end up being something that you start to feel in your hands. You feel some of the smooth, you feel some of the texture, and a lot of times people also end up sort of like holding them to their heart. But I made these were made out of something just in my own idea for my own movie, and they're meant to be in a way passed between people. So a lot of times also we're not supposed to touch glass sculptures. So I tried to also work with getting together that these get passed from hand to hand. As they're sort of moved. And so these objects are made, they're made very much so, you can see it in Pearl's hands, like they're meant to be as sort of the your hand. They kind of have forms that start to feel natural for the hand, but then also don't feel right. So your hand continues to move. And slowly over time, they're already polished, but they have a theory about them that if they're passed down for lots of time, slowly over time, they can take a different shape. These are made out of lead crystal, so it's kind of a soft glass that will wear away ever so slowly. And so those works have been evolved out of this line that's in game. This just shows some of the just the making of them. We make them very slowly. They get formed in the kiln, but then they get polished very slowly. So also that kind of work of caring and care tending to that becomes a big part of it. There's also a couple other pieces. So these I'd say are a little bit more in the conceptual line of making an object that perhaps didn't exist, that was there to hold something that I think maybe you don't find in other objects, and that has the ability out of its kind of material and optical characteristics to make something that's new for us. We've also been making some objects that are more on the functional side to kind of mark and honor particular moments. And so this one is evolved out of these works as well. This one is the start of a wash basin. So it basically holds a very small amount of water on the top rim for washing or caring for a person at any moment, even if life transitions or caring or washing, in a kind of tending and caretaking and ritual sort of aspect to it. We have a couple other pieces. This is another one. My father passed through a lot of moments where I can tell that he no longer wanted earthly foods, and yet still eating other things. In his own sort of, I wouldn't say hallucinations, but just in his body mechanics at the time. And so I began to make bowls, in this, like design them and made them at that time that were impossible to eat out of. So they were meant to host the things that he was eating and impossible for me to eat out of. We have some of these pieces downstairs as well. That just end up, so this one, it has this bridge, basically nothing that can hold anything. And it also has these extensions. If you go back to a lot of the work, and always thinking about it being very attenuated, kind of confusing where it starts and stops. This one too around it has its edge that's a little bit to imply not knowing where it starts or stops in its presence. And then this is the last set I think I'll show. This is something that I've made, and this goes into the workshop too, and just sort of talking about the things that we have around us and can very artfully use as ways to mark times and mark mornings. But I did a photo series where I took pictures of the house that my parents used to live in and my father passed away in. And the similarity to the photos I was talking about earlier were capturing the disappearance of the city in that darkness. I used the trees around the house to sort of disappear the house away, like as a way to say goodbye to it. My mom moved away from it. We knew by chance that the new owners wanted to cut down all the trees. And so in my own kind of mourning of the house going away, and also losing these trees, and my parents lived there for a long time, losing these trees, I wanted to capture them the same way I captured the nighttime. I wanted to mark them before they were gone, and I wanted to let their loss also help me with my loss. And so there's a series of photos, and families of a couple here, that are taken at very particular angles where you only get a little into the house and otherwise the trees are floating away in that house. As a way for me to basically mark that, honor it, not regret it, take photos of it. At a time where I didn't want to take photos of the house, and have that be in its own translation. And that's where I'm gonna leave it. I appreciate all of your attention, so it's personal. Sorry, you're so. Yeah.
Would you describe yourself as an artist who uses architectural forms?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes. Yeah, I think that's a read for sure. It's doing it. I've always kind of dangled in that strange moment of being someone licensed architects. I try to do art as well. I try to design, and I'm always in this moment where I think is not really defined, and I think I'm just kind of constantly chasing what I need to do to tell the story at hand. So I think your read is like the perfect read on the ones that are using the sort of
So are you an artist in residence? Yeah, I know there was an intro earlier, but
Oh, that's
now that I've seen this, I feel the artistic side much more than
Sure.
architecture. I don't maybe I see buildings, but I see a way of displaying them that is really unique.
Right. Yeah, it's my form of art too. I'm a professor of architecture at the University of Michigan, also an architect and a designer and an artist, but anyone who will take me to say there's an artist. I love that. And yeah, I'm here, but the University of Michigan set up this faculty ambassador program through an arts initiative that we have, which has been great. It's allowed this year for two of us to be able to take some of our works and take it to other locations and expand on it and be able to talk about it. And it underscores, I think, a lot of the interest of the arts initiative that really believe strongly, and I match with it very well, that art is so impactful in so much of what we do, and so important in everything to how it's integrated into our research, into our everyday, into what we define as art. And so that's, yeah, so I'm an artist in residence in terms of the initiative, but fully behind the kind of advocacy of just recognizing that art in a way kind of gives everything that much more sort of like meaning or about it a different way. Yeah.
So I have two questions. For
Louder?
Alright, I have two questions, and forgive me for just a simple question to begin with. How, so you said that, I think you mentioned this, said these are kind of projects that you do over the weekend, a lot of things you talk about, are these kind of more passion projects and things that you've kind of set aside because you're obviously very passionate for this, or is it, contract about it for like that? Like, how does that, like, do you do professional work outside of what you just described here, or are there clients that ask for something?
Yeah, I think you're picking up on a really good line that these are hard things to get funding for. So yeah, so I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. Thankfully, I'm able to expand my research on that to do some of this, but most all of what you're seeing has for sure been like, what can I make happen? Or maybe there's a little bit of a commission and I take it way too far and I just want to do it. I'm passionate.
Things that I feel like in a project presentation. So
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah, and it shows some of the earlier work. I didn't show everything chronologically, but you can tell, for instance, when, for example, there's not any funding involved. I've been very fortunate to be involved in things where somebody's like giving me a space that here's a bunch of materials. But those also, I'd say in my own development, I started very small because I'm super intricate in materials and just letting them lead and understand that process. Which also can't necessarily happen in a commission plan either, but it's like a 10-month and very short budget and things like that. So the projects ever slowly got bigger and bigger too, as either there would be maybe a little bit more financial help, or as it became clear that I could pull some of these things off, and somebody would be like, and I'll give you a telehandler, and I'll give you a barn, like that sort of thing. Barn is some efficient to see which made it possible, but like, yeah, we're picking up on things that are. I would love to do this stuff all the time, and I wish that I have many other things to be able to do this on weekends.
I'm gonna say this, studying everything at the University of Florida.
Oh, awesome.
And wondering, what is your process for photograph? Like, when do you know, and this will look really cool, in specific context, or, you work with life a lot, with class.
But, yes, we also probably being, when I was doing my studies, I often found the one who was talking about light and wasn't very good at figuring out how to draw it, or made it come through the drawings. And so I started to just really take on photography as a chance to capture the things that I can talk about with other mediums. And your question also made me think about things very important. I continue, even with like a space like this, but with all my projects, I know that I'm going to continue to learn from them, especially because they're so light and darkness space. I put things out there and then I will be completely surprised by the effect. And so the photograph continues to be like a sketchbook for me, or to capture something, or figure out something while it's happening. And so, yeah, to your question about when to photograph, I have ways of taking pictures of projects that are trying to make sure there's the point. Like, this is important, this is the dead on view. Or this is important, this is how it's at night. And then I have all the pictures where I'm just there, oh my gosh, it's doing that. Or no one's gonna believe me. Or how do I do that in the next project? There's a way to talk about my work that starts to say like, oh, I learned this from this one, and then it happened here or here, or I skipped over some of those moments because of time. But like Second Story, the first project I showed actually helped evolve out of the second project, the fire that I showed, because there's a moment where part of the second floor fell to the first floor. And that made so much sense to me that I'm investigating the second floor of the first floor, not project. So they start to, I use it as a sketchbook to be entirely honest. Yeah, like, yeah. 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 Yes.
So most of us, when we're looking at art or at a gallery or something, we're really just experiencing something on the wall that's totally nonverbal. And what I found really interesting and also very enlightening about your presentation is you're very articulate in explaining what you're trying to do and what came out of it. So I just want to compliment you, and it really helped me understand a lot about what you're doing with your work. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
To put words to art is really hard to do.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. I feel a lot of times too, my projects are trying to be similar to this question. I can't always articulate what I see in something until I make it, in a way. Like, I feel like it's my way of communicating something along the way, and then afterwards, I appreciate your comment. I try so hard to explain it to others.
Well, you're teaching.
I have a lot of practice talking about things, but yeah, I think some of our things are best maybe can't be said in words. So, yeah. Did I see a question back here? Yeah.
What was one of your favorite projects that you worked on with your dad?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. He was, I love so many of them. Savage Landscape, the one that was arson burned. We did that one together every day. That one was super special. He's in the background with some of the photos, so sometimes you're very careful to listen to what I say. I trip up when that photo comes up that he's on. And I think that one might have been the most meaningful one to him as well. Yeah, thanks for asking that.
He's an artist.
He works in the automotive industry, but he has forgot to ask that. He's trying to make eye contact. Did you just ask that? He works in the automotive industry, but then, so he, in his spare time, made these beautiful, does anyone know the show that circus pieces that were like 1920s circus animals with like wooden joints and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
He made his own versions of those with animals that myself or my nephew loved. And he was beautiful. He made these beautiful wooden carved things. And then I would also say the important thing is that he with my strange projects, and even though to them stuff, he never questioned anything, which is always he was like, oh, you want to make this weird? Now we have to open this up because the golden light's coming through. Okay, we're gonna do it. So it was very special. Yeah, that was when I was in my 30s too, which I think was kind of a really important moment to be that close together making stuff. I might have taken us over time.
No, you're perfect.
Well, thank you again to Catie,